Iron Teeth Mountains, late autumn, 1880. The mountain station sat like a forgotten scar carved into the rock. One platform was shack, and a wind that never stopped biting. Rosie Bell stood at the edge of it, wrapped in a torn wedding dress that had already lost its meaning. 3 hours ago she had been a bride. Now she was freight. The mine boss hadn't even bothered to lower his voice. He'd said it in front of the foreman, the cook, 2 laughing teamsters, and the clerk who had stamped her papers like she was a crate of spoiled flour. "She won't fit," he'd said, eyes sliding over her body with open disgust. "Too wide for the shaft ladders, too heavy for the lifts. I'm not marrying a woman I can't haul out of a cave if she gets stuck." The laughter had come fast, sharp, relieved, as if mocking her made them safer. Rosie hadn't cried, not then. She had simply nodded while her future was folded back into burlap logic. Paid fare refunded, contract voided, bride returned. Returned like goods. Now she sat on a supply crate, hands folded tightly in her lap, shoulders hunched inward as if she could compress herself smaller. Snowflakes landed in her hair and melted there, unnoticed. Around her, men worked, loaded sleds, tightened straps. Life continued. No one spoke to her. No one needed to. When a person is reduced to weight and inconvenience, at what point do we stop seeing them as human at all? The desert sun has a way of bleaching the truth right out of a man, leaving nothing but the grit of his soul. You've seen the breaking point, but the real trail is only just beginning. If you believe that even the hardest ground can grow a rose when the right heart tends to it, then pull up a chair and stay a while. Subscribe to Legends of Western Love, and don't let these stories be lost to the shifting sands. We have a long way to ride, partner. Boots crunched on gravel. Rosie looked up. The man approaching was enormous, not broad in the soft way of comfort, but hard, angular, scarred by years of work and violence. His beard was streaked with gray despite his age, his face marked by pale lines that told stories nobody ever asked him to repeat. Gorr Stone Bear Macklin, a mule man, a hauler, someone you hired when the mountain said no and you refused to listen. He stopped in front of her, spit dark tobacco juice into the snow, and looked her over like a broken tool. "You're the package?" he asked. Rosie nodded once. He grunted. "Mine boss said nothing about you being this damn big." Her fingers tightened. "I can walk," she said quickly. Then quieter. "Usually," he snorted, "usually don't count for much up here." He turned, already dismissing her, then paused when she didn't follow. "You coming?" he asked. Rosie swallowed. I hurt my ankle when he laughed. I tried to get away and..." Gorr turned fully this time, irritation flashing across his scarred face. He looked down at her swollen ankle, the way she was bracing herself on the crate to stay upright. Snow thickened. The sky darkened earlier than it should have. The mountain was closing its fist. Gorr cursed under his breath. He did the math the way men like him always did. Distance, daylight, weather, weight. He saw delay, risk, loss, and he saw her. 300 pounds of someone else's problem. "You're gonna break my back, so," he said. The word landed hard. Rosie flinched, but she didn't argue. She'd learned long ago that protesting only gave cruelty something to push against. Gorr reached for his pack frame. Heavy oak, iron-braced, built to carry furs, not people. He turned his back to her and jerked his head. "Get on." She stared at him. "You're carrying me?" "Unless you've grown wings since I looked away," he said. "Daylight's burning." Her face burned hotter than the cold. With shaking hands, she climbed onto the frame. The wood creaked. Gorr grunted as he stood, muscles straining, boots sinking slightly into the snow. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, "you really are a load." Rosie held her breath, arms wrapped tight, trying to disappear inside herself. The mountain didn't care, and neither, it seemed, did the man who had just turned and started walking, carrying her away from humiliation, deeper into danger, and toward a fate neither of them yet understood. The first step echoed. The journey had begun. The trail narrowed the moment they left the station behind. Civilization fell away quickly in the Iron Teeth Mountains. The platform, the shack, the laughter, all of it vanished behind a bend of stone and pine, swallowed as if it had never existed. Ahead lay only switchbacks carved into the mountainside, crusted with early snow and edged by long, punishing drops. Gorr walked without speaking. Each step was measured, deliberate. His breath came slow and controlled, fogging the air in front of him. Rosie could feel the tension in his shoulders through the pack frame, the way his muscles adjusted constantly to compensate for her weight. She hated that she could feel it. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Below them, far below, the valley lay hidden under rolling mist. Above, clouds dragged themselves across the peaks like torn wool. The wind picked up, slipping icy fingers through Rosie's thin dress and into her bones. "Lean left when I lean left," Gorr said suddenly. She startled. "What?" "You shift your weight against me like that again, and we both go down," he snapped. "I lean, you lean, same time." "Yes, I'm sorry." She adjusted quickly, heart pounding, another stretch of silence. As they climbed, they passed two men coming down with empty sleds. The men slowed when they saw the shape on Gorr's back. One of them laughed outright. "Hell, stone bear," he called. "You hauling ore or livestock now?" Gorr didn't answer. He didn't slow either. Rosie squeezed her eyes shut, shame crawling up her spine. She waited for him to add something, to agree, to mock her too. He didn't. The men laughed again, louder this time, and moved on. Watching the distance grow between cruelty and dignity, the world was quick to judge what it could see. But the mountain, cold, indifferent, measured only balance, endurance, and truth. They walked for hours. Rosie's ankle throbbed with each jolt of the trail. Her thighs burned from being pinned in one position, but worse than the pain was the fear. Fear that she would slip, shift wrong, become the reason they fell. Finally, she spoke. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You could leave me at the next shelter, or go back." Gorr let out a harsh breath. "You think I don't know that?" She swallowed. "Then why?" "Because I took the job," he said. "And because if I leave you out here, you die." His voice was flat, not kind, not cruel, simply factual. Rosie nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said. "This isn't mercy, it's logistics." The trail steepened as afternoon bled toward evening. Snow thickened, sticking to Gorr's beard, collecting on Rosie's sleeves. Her fingers went numb. When they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a frozen ravine, Gorr stopped. He set her down carefully against the rock wall and rolled his shoulders, grimacing as blood returned to compressed muscles. "Rest," he said. 5 minutes. Rosie watched him as he drank from his canteen, the way his scarred face tightened with fatigue he refused to acknowledge. For the first time, she saw not a monster, or a brute, but a man being ground down by the same world that had ground her. "People laugh at you, too," she said before she could stop herself. Gorr shot her a sharp look. "For your scars," she added quickly. "I saw how they looked at your face." His jaw clenched. "Eyes wander where mine's are small." She nodded. "My father used to say something like that." He paused. "Used to?" "He's gone." Gorr said nothing, but something in his posture shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible. The pact between them wasn't spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. They would walk together because the mountain allowed no other choice. Two outcasts bound not by affection or trust, but by cold distance and the simple truth that alone neither of them would survive. 5 minutes passed. Gorr crouched again, turned his back, and jerked his head. "On," he said. Rosie climbed up, slower this time, more careful. When they moved again, the wind howled louder, as if the mountain itself were laughing, daring them to continue. Night fell faster than either of them expected. In the Iron Teeth Mountains, darkness didn't arrive. It dropped. One moment, the sky was bruised purple. The next, it was black and starless, clouds swallowing what little moonlight might have helped them. Snow hissed sideways, driven by a wind that cut through wool and skin with equal cruelty. Gorr pushed on longer than he should have. Rosie felt it in the way his steps shortened, in the slight hitch of breath he tried to hide. Every few minutes his shoulder twitched, compensating for the uneven load. She leaned when he leaned, matched him as best she could, but fatigue had a way of turning precision into guesswork. Neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of two people who had learned that words often made things worse. They reached a narrow traverse, carved into a cliff face, barely wide enough for one man, never meant for a man carrying another human being. "Don't move unless I tell you," Gorr said. Rosie nodded, heart pounding. The rock beneath his boots was glazed with ice, old ice, polished by wind and time, slick as glass. Gorr tested each step before committing his weight, teeth clenched, breath shallow. Halfway across, the wind hit them like a living thing. It slammed into Gorr's side, shoving his balance off-center. Instinctively, Rosie shifted, just a little, trying to help. It was the wrong direction. "Don't," Gorr started. The world tilted. A sharp crack echoed as loose stone broke free under Gorr's boot. For a heartbeat, they hovered in a terrible stillness, suspended between gravity and hope. Then the mountain took its due. They went over the edge together. Rosie screamed once before the sound was ripped away by wind. The pack frame slammed against rock, tearing skin, snapping straps. Gorr twisted mid-fall, trying foolishly to shield her. They crashed into darkness. The impact drove the breath from Gorr's lungs in a brutal rush. Pain exploded across his chest as ribs protested. His right shoulder wrenched violently, the joint tearing loose with a sickening, wet pop that echoed louder than his scream. Then everything went black. When Gorr came back to himself, cold was the first thing he felt. Not the sharp cold of wind, but the deep, invasive cold that crept inward, settling in muscle and bone. His body shook uncontrollably, teeth chattering so hard his jaw ached. Pain followed next, white hot, blooming from his shoulder, radiating down his arm. He tried to move and nearly passed out again. "Don't," a voice said urgently. "Rosie." He forced his eyes open. They were wedged in a narrow crevasse barely 10 feet across, sheer rock walls rising on either side like a stone coffin. Snow drifted down from above, collecting silently around them. A narrow strip of sky glowed faintly overhead, already fading. Rosie knelt beside him, her face pale, eyes wide with terror, but her hands were steady as she touched his shoulder. "It's dislocated," she said. "Badly." "I know," Gorr rasped. "How bad is the rest?" She swallowed. "Your ribs. At least one cracked, maybe more." He laughed weakly, then winced. "Figures." Gorr followed her gaze upward, 20 feet to the rim, smooth rock, no handholds, no chance with one arm hanging useless at his side. Snow thickened. He did the math. He always did. At this altitude, with wind funneling through the crevasse, the temperature would drop hard overnight, without shelter, without fire, without mobility. Hypothermia would take them before dawn. His body, built for strength, not insulation, was already burning energy just to keep him conscious. He could feel it, the way the cold gnawed at him faster than it should. "You need to climb out," he said. Rosie shook her head immediately. "I can't." "You have to," he snapped. "Get help." "Help is 2 days away," she said, voice tight. "Even if I made it out, you'd be dead before I reached anyone." "Then we're both dead." "No." The word cut through the crevasse, firm and unyielding. Gorr stared at her. "Don't lie to yourself." "I'm not," Rosie said. She moved then, shrugging off her heavy wool cloak despite the cold. She tore at the remains of her wedding dress, ripping fabric with surprising strength, cutting long strips with Gorr's knife. "What are you doing?" he demanded, shivering harder now. "Thinking," she said. "Something you should try instead of surrendering." She spread the fabric on the ground, layering it thickly, creating a crude barrier between rock and skin. Rosie hesitated only a moment before pulling off the last of her outer layers, teeth chattering now as the cold finally began to sink into her. Then she lay down and tugged at Gorr with both hands. "Get over here." Gorr blinked. "What? Now?" He tried to protest, but his body betrayed him. Weakness flooded his limbs as the cold crept deeper, making decisions for him. Rosie pulled him against her, wrapping her arms around his massive frame, pressing him close, sealing gaps where heat could escape. She tucked his head beneath her chin, his face against her shoulder. Her body was warm, not just warm, radiating heat, thick layers of it, stored and steady. He could feel it almost immediately, the violent shivering easing as warmth transferred from her to him. "This is," he muttered, "humiliating." She snorted despite herself. "Shut up and let the pig do what she's good at." Minutes passed, then more. Gorr's breathing slowed. The shaking faded to a tremor, then stopped altogether. Consciousness settled back into him like something fragile but real. For the first time since the fall, he felt safe. What the world had mocked as excess, what it had tried to shame and discard, was now the very thing standing between life and death. Strength, it seemed, wore many shapes. Hours later, Gorr stirred. Darkness wrapped them completely now, broken only by the faint glow of snow, reflecting what little light remained above. Rosie was still awake. "You're awake," she whispered. "Yeah." Silence stretched again, but this time it was different, warmer, less afraid. After a while, Gorr spoke. "These scars," he said quietly. "I tell people, a bear did it." Rosie didn't interrupt. It was my father, he continued. He wanted a champion, tougher than him, stronger. He'd beat me with a chain if I cried, said fear was weakness. His jaw tightened. I got big to survive him, strong enough that he couldn't hurt me anymore. He exhaled slowly. But inside, I'm still that kid. That's why I hate weakness. It reminds me of what I used to be. Rosie's hand found his face in the dark, fingers gentle as they traced the ridges of old scars. I wasn't always like this either, she said. He listened. When I was 12, men tried to kidnap me outside my school, she said softly. My father stopped them, but I kept thinking, if I'd been heavier, if I'd been harder to lift, they wouldn't have tried. Her voice wavered. So I built walls. I thought if I was heavy enough, ugly enough, no one would ever want to take me again. Gorr turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze though he could barely see her. You're not ugly, he said. She gave a quiet, broken laugh. You called me a sow. I was wrong, he said immediately. I see that now. He lifted his good hand with effort and touched her cheek. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Rosie closed her eyes, and for the first time, the cold did not feel like an enemy. Morning came quietly, not with sun, but with a thinning of darkness, the kind that suggested the world was still there, waiting to see if they would be too. Rosie woke first. Her limbs were stiff, her back aching from holding Gorr through the night, but he was breathing steadily now. Color had returned to his face. The blue had faded from his lips. He was alive. She allowed herself one long shuddering breath of relief. Carefully she shifted, easing him onto the layered fabric they'd made. He groaned softly but didn't wake. Rosie looked up at the crevasse walls, at the narrow ribbon of pale sky above. Snow had stopped. The wind had softened, and then she saw it. 30 feet up the wall opposite them, rusted iron half swallowed by rock, an old mining pulley, forgotten when the vein ran dry. A steel cable ran up to the rim, disappearing over the edge. On the other end, far below, hung a counterweight basket, dangling over a deeper drop. Her heart began to race. When Gorr woke, she was still staring at it. You're thinking too loud, he rasped. She smiled faintly. You're awake. Hard not to be when my shoulder's screaming, he said. Then he followed her gaze. What did you find? Hope, she said. She explained quickly. The pulley, the basket, the math. I weigh more than you, she said. If I drop, I can lift you. Gorr stared at her in horror. The brake's rusted. You'll fall straight to the bottom. I know. No. He tried to sit up and failed. Absolutely not. She met his eyes, calm and steady. You carried me when everyone else saw a dead weight. Let me carry you now. Before he could argue further, she tied the rope around his waist, fingers shaking but sure. Then she limped toward the basket. Rosie! She turned back once. Live! Then she stepped in and released the brake. The world dropped. The cable screamed. Gorr was yanked upward violently, dragged toward the rim as the basket plummeted below. He hit the top hard, rolling into snow, pain exploding through his body. Below, Rosie fell. The brake shrieked, then caught. 10 feet above jagged stone, Gorr lunged for the winch. His bad arm hung useless. Without thinking, he jammed his good arm into the gears. Bone cracked. The machine stopped. Silence. They stared at each other across the gulf, breathing hard, alive. You idiot! Rosie shouted up, tears freezing on her cheeks. You beautiful, stupid idiot. She hauled herself up slowly, agonizing inch by inch. By the time she reached the rim, Gorr was unconscious, blood staining the snow. Rosie didn't hesitate. She lifted him onto her back, and she walked 10 miles, knee-deep stew, a bleeding man, a mountain that didn't care. When she reached the way station at dawn, she collapsed through the door. "Help him," she gasped. "Please?" Weeks later, when the worst had passed, they sat together in a small cabin at the mountain's base. Gorr had lost his arm below the elbow. Rosie sat beside him, holding his hand. "You saved me," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We saved each other." Outside, snow melted. Spring waited. Spring did not arrive gently. It came with mud, swollen rivers, and memories that refused to stay buried. The cabin at the base of the Iron Teeth had been a refuge at first. Rough-hewn logs, a stone hearth, the smell of pine sap and bread. Rosie learned the rhythm of the place quickly. She learned how to split kindling without twisting her ankle, how to set traps, how to make stews that stretched thin supplies into something warm and sustaining. Gorr learned how to live with absence. The stump where his arm had been was still tender, still angry. Some nights, the pain flared so sharply it stole his breath. Rosie would wake to the sound of him grinding his teeth, sweat soaking the bedroll. She never asked permission. She would build the fire higher, wrap him in blankets, press her warmth against him until the shaking passed. He hated that he needed it. He loved that she stayed. In daylight, they worked side by side. He taught her what he could, how to read the sky, how to listen to snowpack and gourd. She taught him other things, patience, slowness, the discipline of rest. And slowly, something fragile took root. But shadows do not disappear. Just because a place feels safe, they announce themselves. It happened one afternoon when Rosie was returning from the stream with a pail of water. She froze when she saw 2 horses tied outside the cabin. A man stood on the porch, well-dressed, clean boots, city posture that didn't belong in the mountains, the mine boss. "You," he said when he saw her, his mouth twisted. "Didn't expect you to last the winter." Rosie set the pail down carefully. Her heart pounded, but she didn't retreat. "What do you want?" she asked. He stepped closer, eyes raking over her body with the same old calculation. "Stone Bear owes me. He broke contract when he didn't return a loan." His gaze slid past her toward the cabin. "And I hear he's half a man now." The Gorr appeared in the doorway, rifle braced awkwardly against his shoulder. "Say what you came to say," he growled. "Then leave." The boss smiled thinly. "I came to collect, or to offer terms." Rosie felt the air tighten. "You're on land that isn't yours," the boss continued. "I could have the sheriff here by morning, or—" His eyes flicked back to Rosie. "You could come back with me. Finish what you were sold for. I'll forgive the rest." The words hit like ice water. Gorr's jaw clenched. His grip on the rifle shook. When love is threatened by power, who is asked to pay the price? Rosie looked from the boss to Gorr. She saw the fear Gorr tried to hide, the fear of being useless, of failing her, of losing the one place he still felt whole. "No," she said. The word was steady. The boss laughed. "You don't get to decide." Rosie stepped forward, placing herself between the men. "I do," she said, "because I'm not property. I'm not cargo, and I won't be traded to make someone else feel whole. The boss's smile vanished. You think this cripple can protect you? Gorr raised the rifle, but his balance wavered. Rosie didn't look back at him. You don't understand, she said calmly. He doesn't have to. She picked up the heavy iron poker by the hearth and held it with both hands, stance wide, unafraid. You should leave. For a long moment, the mountain held its breath. Then the boss sat in the dirt and stepped back. This isn't over. He mounted his horse and rode away. Silence followed. Gorr lowered the rifle slowly, shame and relief warring in his chest. I should have, he started. Rosie turned to him. No. She reached out, took his good hand. This time, it was my turn to stay. The shadow had come, and for the first time, it had not won. The shadow did not wait long. 2 days after the mine boss rode away, the sound of hooves came again, this time heavier, louder, careless with threat. Rosie felt it first, a vibration through the ground as she kneaded dough at the rough table. Gorr heard it a heartbeat later and went still. They're not here to talk, he said. Outside, 4 riders reined in. The boss sat tall among them, the sheriff at his side, badge catching the sun like a blade. This is unlawful occupation, the sheriff called. Come out peaceably. Rosie wiped her hands, calm settling into her bones. She had known this moment would come. Safe places on the frontier were only borrowed, never owned. Gorr stepped forward, rifle braced against his hip. His balance wavered. The missing arm changed everything. He knew it. They knew it. Drop it, the sheriff warned. The boss smiled. You should have stayed broken, Stone Bear. The rifle shook. Rosie moved. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She walked past Gorr and into the open iron poker in her hands, feet planted wide in the mud. She doesn't belong to you, Gorr said hoarsely. Rosie lifted her chin. I belong to myself. The sheriff hesitated, eyes flicking between her stance and the iron in her hands. He saw what the others missed. Not softness, not excess, but mass, set with purpose, balance, grounded. The boss sneered. You'd think that makes you strong, Rosie smiled, small and fierce. No, I know it does. He spurred his horse forward. Rosie stepped in, close, too close for a man used to distance. The poker came up and struck the horse's tack, not the animal, sending it rearing. The rider swore, yanked the reins. Chaos rippled. Gorr fired, not to kill, but to warn. The shot cracked the air, splintered wood near the sheriff's boot. The message landed. Rosie didn't retreat. She advanced one step, then another, eyes locked on the boss. Leave, she said, or I will finish this. For a long breath, the mountain watched. Then the sheriff raised a hand. That's enough. The boss protested, but the law had found its courage at last. They backed away, anger burning, promise unfulfilled. When the riders were gone, Rosie's knees trembled. Gorr caught her, steadying her with his shoulder. You were incredible, he whispered. She shook her head, breath ragged. I was ready. Strength is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to stand anyway. After the riders disappeared into the trees, the world did not immediately soften. It took time. The cabin felt different now, no longer just a hiding place, but a line drawn in the dirt. Rosie and Gorr moved through the days carefully, as if listening for echoes that might return. They fixed what had been broken, the fence, the door latch, the places inside themselves that had learned to expect loss. Gorr healed slowly. The stump of his arm closed, then scarred. Some mornings he woke ready to fight the day. Other mornings he sat on the edge of the bed, jaw tight, staring at the floor like it had betrayed him. Rosie never rushed him. She brought him coffee, sat beside him, let silence do its work. One evening, as spring rain tapped gently against the roof, Gorr finally spoke. "I don't know who I am without the strength," he said. "All my life, it was the only thing that made me worth something." Rosie considered this, then reached for his hand. "You're wrong," she said softly. "Strength was what you used, not who you were." He looked at her, eyes wet but unashamed. "And you?" he asked. "Who are you now?" She smiled, slow, thoughtful. "I'm still big, still heavy, but I'm not hiding anymore." He squeezed her hand. "I need you." The words were not heroic. They were honest. "And I choose you," she replied. They did not speak of love like it was a grand thing. They spoke of it like shelter, something built, repaired, and returned to each night. Weeks later, they stood outside the cabin as the first wildflowers pushed through melting snow. Gorr leaned into Rosie's side. She rested her head against his. For the first time, neither felt like they were surviving. They were living.
Some stories end with victory. Others end with belonging. This one ends with a question left gently in the quiet air of the mountains. When the world tells someone they are too much, too broken, too heavy to be loved, what happens when they refuse to believe it? If this story moved you, take a moment to sit with it. What part of yourself have you been taught to hide? And what might happen if it turned out to be your greatest strength?